Welcome to Crafty Carper TV, and today we're on the bank with none other than Julian Cundiff. It's issue 200 of the mag that's just come up, and Julian's been in it from the start. So where did it all begin, Jules?
Where did it all begin? The reality of it began probably in 1986 when I was a keen carp angler. I'd read quite a few magazines, and there was no way I was going to get in Course Angler or any of the monthly magazines. I'd read the CAA magazine, I'd read the Carp Society's magazine, and Tim had put his address in it, Cemetery Road address. And I remember writing my first article and sending it to Tim. Didn't know how it worked in those days, so I sent it off, I put a stamp test envelope in, and I sent it to Tim, and I think I called it Who's Kidding Who, which was about a water which was reputed to hold big fish but never did. And amazingly, I got a letter back from Tim in about a week, and he corrected my grammar, as he still does, pointed out one or two things to me, but said your article was good enough. If your pictures were in focus, I could probably use it. So I obviously returned about 50 pictures to him, and I got in there, and I was a keenie obviously in those days, just as I am now. Tim would write to me, I'd write back. Obviously my knowledge of carp fishing impressed him a bit of the modern scene. I'd go to his slideshows. He clearly understood I love the written word. I love fishing, but I also love the written word. Yeah. And he took me under his wing and he invited me to where he lived, and we did some writing and things like that. And bit by bit, I sort of developed an association with Tim, and then I became the features editor for Carp Fisher, which was probably one of my proudest moments ever. In 1987 was being appointed features editor for the Carp Society magazine Carp Fisher, and that sort of grew. And then Tim set up Angling Publications, which was Carp World, which I appeared in the first one. And so my association really with Crafty Carper started with my association with Tim Paisley in 1986. So 10 years later, Crafty Carper came out, but obviously before then I've been involved in Carp Fisher, Carp World and things like that. I was keen then, and I'm just as keen now.
Yeah, well, it seems it, Jules. I mean, where exactly did it go with Crafty though? You know, you started off in the first, when you're in the first issue.
Wow,
yeah.
Crikey, that takes me back. I remember you asking me, I'm one of these people who keeps all magazines, so I've kept my Crafties, I've kept the Carp Worlds, all my Carp Fishers. And I look back at these in pride. I really do. I mean, how many people have been the editor of a magazine? There aren't that many who are still doing it and are still doing it today. I remember with Carp World, in those days there were so few magazines out. There was a thirst for knowledge. Carp World, obviously, was a limit to how big we could make it, and it was getting just literally so big it wouldn't fit through letterboxes at time when you had the supplements, Leslie's of Luton, and Tim thought, Tim was quite right, and that's the thing about Tim, he sees things far before other people. I'm great at fine-tuning them, but Tim sees these things. He's a visionary, whereas I deal with the practicality. So Tim realised there was a thirst for another magazine, a technical based magazine. He came up with the idea, we had the meetings, we knew who we wanted in it, and you know, it was Tim. I was simply the one who put it into operation. Tim came up with the brainwave, and I was the one who sourced the material, or quite a lot of the material.
I mean, for the time as well, it was quite technical. I mean, you got the likes of Crowley in there, and Briggsy, and Tim himself doing his PVA
technical
bags back there for the motorway.
It amazes me now, people complain about, oh, the magazines are nothing but technical, it's all instruction. When I started carp fishing, well, in fact when I started fishing, particularly carp fishing, you would be told use a boilie, use a size 8 hook and a hook length. There was no advice specifically about exactly which. I think Kevin Maddox was the first one with Carp Fever who started being more analytical about it. But generally most magazines skirted the issue. They talked about hook lengths, hooks, things like that. They didn't actually say precisely. And it's no good to be told to use an 8-inch hook length. You know, what good is that? It's not. It makes you think, of course, but it's not great on the learning curve.
No rig specifics as such.
There were no rig specifics, and the magazines were just full of general fishing stories, you know, adventure stories. Carp World broke the mould somewhat, but we realised that there was an absolutely huge thirst for Gissabait, as Tim used to call it, Gissabait, give us a big rig, give us a water. Specifics, and I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. You know, if I'm going to a water, even nowadays with 30 years of carp fishing, I'd love to know the bait, the hook length, the rig, the swim, the venue that it's working, because that's my starting point. So, you know, people have a go at Nash, Corder and all those for making it too easy. Fair play. Make it as easy as possible for me or anybody. You know, it's we don't want people to struggle. They will struggle as they move on, but starting points, which are magazines like this, are great. They make it so much easier.
At the end of the day, you want people to come into the sport, don't you, and, you know, catch a few fish to get themselves into it properly.
Absolutely. If they don't catch, they won't keep doing it. And when people say, prices of magazines, they're £4 or £5, and they'll spend £100 on a rod pod, they'll spend £200 or £300 on rods, and loads of money on boilies and permits, yet most that I meet that are struggling don't know the basics. And, you know, I say to them, well, what are you doing that for? I don't know. And, you know, the technical books, Ali Hamidi's Masterclass, My Short Session Fishing, if the majority of people who are struggling read those, that is simply my brain on a piece of paper. I'm not doing anything today that's not in there. And if they copied that, they would generally, as a starting point, do just as well on what maybe 80% as well as me, because I've got more experience. But by copying those, that's your starting point, because catching is what keeps you going.
Of course it is.
You know, we could all say, yeah, do your apprenticeship, you know, spend 6 months catching one double. That ain't going to keep a kid in fishing who wants to use Xbox as well. They need to catch fish. So fair play to Nash, Corder, who do the TV, who do all the free videos and the free DVDs. They are the ones that keep carp fishing alive.
Yeah, of course they are. I mean, while you've got your magazines as well, it's always a case of, you know, there's always something different in there. There's always the usual chod rig, solid bag rig, stuff like that. But, you know, people coming into the sport, it might be the first time they've seen it.
I'll be honest, I read all the magazines. Every single magazine carp fishing that comes out, I read. I doubt there's any magazine that I've not been in some way influenced by. And I thought, do you know what, that's a good idea. Now that's a better way of doing it. Now, if I'm reading those magazines and it's helping me, somebody who hasn't got as much experience as me, it will help them out a lot more. Because the more experience you've got, the learning curve gets tighter and tighter to learn. You know, it becomes very difficult. But even nowadays, from the very basic magazines to the to the more hardcore ones, I learn something, or I'm inspired or motivated.
Yeah, even if it helps you find tweaks, sort of, some of your setup. And
I tell you what, I think, do you know what, I'd thought of that, and oh, that would work well with me. And so when people poo-poo magazines and say, Crafty Carper, they generally haven't read it, and they generally have got a higher opinion of themselves than really the results speak.
I mean, with the amount of time you've been in it as well, Jules, you know, you've seen a lot of changes. What's been the biggest change or the biggest influence of sort of like the mag over the years?
I think when we started, there wasn't so much information. You know, with Carp World, you could give so much away, but people wanted to read the long stories, the Martin Clark type things, the big interviews and things like that. And it wasn't possible to have a magazine which was 50% technical and 50% story. It doesn't work, although it sounds great in theory. You don't alienate 50% of your audience, you alienate quite a lot of your audience. The thing with this is that you've got all these different minds fishing different waters, fishing them different ways, and they're just putting them in the arena to learn from. You know, you could put 4 of the best carp anglers in the country who fish the same water, and I guarantee they'll all have different ways to catch the same carp that they caught. And it's the same with waters. You know, you have got thousands, maybe tens of thousands of waters nowadays full of carp. All these different minds putting their information on paper gives you inspiration, because it's a question of, well, that didn't work, but I tell you what, I'll try that, and I'll try that. And, you know, the chod rig, yeah, maybe it has been done to death, but I tell you what, if it catches, does it matter that it's been done to death? People come up with different ideas about different ways to do it, and, you know, no instruction is ever wasted. It's very easy to look on the outside and go, I know all that. Generally, people who do say that don't know all that.
Yeah, there's a hell of a lot of that about at the minute anyway. You know, no matter where you look, people think it's readily available on forums, the internet, which they're all great tools, but at the end of the day, you know, it's one of those things where if it's in print, I don't tend to skip past anything.
No. I mean, I use social media, Facebook, Twitter, things like that a lot, but it's sort of in a different way. magazines and books I read, and it goes in a lot easier for me.
Yeah, I know what you mean with that.
And I think with magazines and the books, the social media may be the inspiration, but the magazines and the books where you can directly copy it from, and that's the biggest thing about the magazines, is that you can copy the advice, and that's great. It's a shortcut to success. It's £4, which in some ways may change your carp fishing life forever. Some of the stuff I've read in there that's given me ideas has made carp fishing 100% better for me. Just things I've read from other people. Going back, I remember reading in the old days, I think it was a Carp Sighting magazine, Ian Booker, about pre-baiting for carp. And I used to think 20 or 30 boilies was pre-baiting, and he was talking about carrier bags.
That's just you being tight.
That's me being tight. I still do think that. He was pre-baiting with carrier bags. Now, I was never going to meet Ian Booker. He was in Kent or that area. I was never going to come across people like that. I read that in print, and I read, and I'll never forget this, and it said, this bait caught me 620s in a day. And I thought, well, that's a misprint, Tim, you've missed that. He must mean 620s in a season. No, it was 620s in a day in the mid-80s. Now, that was incredible. And I remember thinking, well, if it works in Kent, why won't it work in Yorkshire? And I remember doing it in Yorkshire, and waters that you'd maybe catch 10 fish a season. I'm catching 90 fish in 6 weeks. Yeah. Not because I've become a better angler, but because of something I'd read in print and applied to my waters. So, it's very easy to poo-poo the magazines, but the advice in them, I'd say, if you don't want to read them, don't want to read them. But I tell you what, you are losing out on advice. Yeah, definitely. On that subject, Jules, about campaign fishing that you just touched on there. You used to fish campaigns on such as Tyler, Motorway, Selby Three Lakes, but now it seems that you're more at home fishing day ticket waters for as many fish as possible, rather than the 1 or 2 targets. When I started fishing, obviously we all like to imagine we're really good. Wherever you are in your fishing, you've often got a higher opinion of yourself than you probably are in reality. And when I started fishing, the way that I learned was just to fish one water to death. So I'd pick one summer water and one winter water, and I would fish that water to death. Might be 2 nights a week, might be 3 nights a week, might be 4 nights a week, depending whether I had a girlfriend or not. If I had a girlfriend, I fish more. No, I was only joking. And that was the way I learned. The way you learn is by putting the hours in. The less experience you have an angler, you have to put the hours in. There is no way around it. If you're not there, you will not learn. So as an inexperienced angler, I'd only been carp fishing 5 years, 10 years, then the hours I put in made me the angler I am today. So I would go, and looking back, I'd look at some of those months, those weeks, those days, and looking back, I know I was never going to get a fish. It was the wrong time of year, there was too much angler pressure, the conditions are wrong, but I'd pick that water, and so it was that water from May till October, and then in winter it was going to be that water from November through to March. I had no choice. You were always going to fish it no matter what. I was always going to fish it come what may. Now, as you get older, and it happens to all of us, time becomes very important. More things press on your time, and the time that I can do fishing, I have to get right. I haven't got loads of time to go fishing, and when I go, I want to do it the best I can. And I realised that maybe by picking 2 or 3 summer waters and picking 4 or 5 winter waters, I could give myself the best chance of catching fish. Now, there had to be the fish I wanted to catch, so I didn't want to fish waters where I'd just get a bite. I had to enjoy the water, had to enjoy the size of fish it was, and I had to enjoy the surroundings, the people there. So I'll pick 2 or 3 summer waters and 4 or 5 winter waters. And I've become experienced as an angler to know when certain waters will fish. There are some waters that fish great prior to spawning. There are some waters that fish better after spawning. There are some waters that fish better in flat, calm conditions. There are some waters that fish better when there's a rain on. There are some waters when they've got colour in the water, you're wasting your time. And that's summer and winter alike. When it gets to winter, it becomes even harder because there's less fish feeding, so there's less mistakes made. In summer, you can get not the best swim, but a second or third choice swim, and you can get away with it. In winter, sometimes if you are not in the best swim, you are wasting your time. So in winter, not only do I look at the conditions, I look at the angler pressure, I'll pick my days when there's less angler pressure, I'll get there before anybody else, I'll stay there later than anybody else. So although I do campaigns, it's campaigns split over 3 waters or split over 5 waters. So I fish just as much now as I ever have done, but I use my time more wisely.
Fair enough. That's well, that's the way to do it, really, Jules. You know, you've got to be in the right place at the right time, and if you know when they are, then you're already one step ahead, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this earlier about fishing today. Now, this winter I've got 4 or 5 different waters I fish. Now, I, touch wood, haven't blanked on any of those waters yet, including today, and that's only because I've picked the right water at the right time.
Yeah.
I know by looking at the conditions what waters will fish in what months and in what conditions. Some waters do not fish in the rain, some waters fish in flat calm. So I knew today that this would be a pretty good day for this. So my preparations for today started 2 weeks ago. I needed the day booked off. I needed to make sure that the conditions were right for this water. If they weren't right for this water, we go to another water. I know what time people are likely to be here, so I'll be here an hour before them.
Yeah.
So this water opens its gate at 7 o'clock. I'm up at 5 o'clock or 5:30. I'll be at that gate for 6:15. That's 45 minutes wasting my time, but I knew which swim I wanted to be in, and a second choice swim, for the sake of getting up earlier, I'll get up earlier. Yeah. And I hate getting up early. Yeah. I absolutely detest getting up early on my days off, but I even more detest not getting the swim I wanted because I stayed in bed. And so it's a matter of, you know, using your time. You know, I made sure that the bags were ready when I turned up here. I knew what the right line to use. I got the leaders on the rods. Yeah. And I had everything planned so that when I'm here there's less chance of mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, looking at that, Jules, you know, your fishing has changed as much as Crafty over the years. Going from your campaigns to, you know, getting out when you can now to catch whatever you can. But you know, you've been there from the start, so it's been a cracker.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to believe that we are 200 issues on. Some have come, some have gone.
Yeah.
And to be in number 1 and still be in number 200, I'm really proud of that. You don't get there if you don't enjoy carp fishing. You ain't going to do 200 issues of a magazine. You're still not going to be there in 96 and 2014. That ain't going to happen. If you don't enjoy it, you're not going to keep doing it, because one day you're going to wake up and think, what am I doing here? Yeah. I absolutely love my carp fishing because I do it on my own terms, you know, and that's a great thing about Tim and Angler Publications. They've always let me do it on my own terms. If it doesn't fit with that magazine, then I'm not in that magazine. But I've never been told, you have to do it this way, and we'd like you to do this, and we'd like you to climb trees and cast out bits of pepperami.
Yeah.
My fishing is my fishing, and I think that's probably why people appreciate it. I tell it honestly.
Yeah.
People come down, they see what I'm fishing, and it's exactly what I write about. I only fish waters I want to fish, and I do it my way. And
of course, and you've got a work and a family life in there as well.
You know, I work 9 to 5, I've got my family life. You know, that comes first, my work and my family life and my health. And then I fit carp fishing around that. Carp fishing is the most important thing in the world, but it's the most important thing in the world behind 2 or 3 other things.
Yeah.
I can't say that work's more important than fishing, or fishing's more important than my health, or my girlfriend's more important than my dad, because you can't say that. But when I go fishing, it is the most important thing in the world for those 2 hours, 5 hours, or 10 hours. And I give it 100%, because that's the only way. The guys who give it 100% are the people who are successful. The guys who give it 98% are not as successful.
Yeah, that's all you can do. But as ever, you'll have to leave it as there. As ever, we'll have to leave it there, Jules. And you can catch Julian in issue 200